Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because we're about to dive into what is arguably the single most important mechanical invention in the history of human civilization. We're going to take a journey spanning thousands of years, crossing multiple continents, and unpacking some of the most ingenious leaps of logic our ancestors ever made. So let's just get right into it. We are exploring humanity's first great machine, the wheel. We'll trace its pretty surprising origins from the sun-baked mud of ancient Mesopotamia all the way to the vast, windswept Eurasian steppes. We're going to break down the brilliant physics that make it tick, and, maybe most fascinating of all, explore exactly why some highly advanced ancient cultures completely ignored it for transportation.
Just take a second and think about the world right in front of you. Today, wheels are literally everywhere. We're talking cars, bicycles, trains, airplanes, the conveyor belts in giant factories, even the tiny, intricate gears inside mechanical watches. We are totally surrounded by circles rotating on axes. It's the literal foundation of modern industry and global movement. But there was a time, a remarkably long stretch of human history actually, when humanity had never seen a wheel. For tens of thousands of years, early humans hunted, they gathered, they built massive shelters, and even kicked off the agricultural revolution, all without a single-wheeled device. I really want you to hold on to that cinematic thought for a second. Imagine how vastly different, how incredibly slow and grueling a world without wheels actually was. Every single hunted animal, every felled tree, every massive stone block for a rudimentary shelter had to be carried on human backs or dragged across the unforgiving earth. Range was severely limited, trade was agonizingly slow. The physical boundaries of early human life were defined entirely by what muscles could bear. Section 1. Lice before the wheel. Before we get into the invention itself, we really need to understand the monumental problem it eventually solved. Just picture the sheer physical toll of early human construction and transport. We're talking about moving massive hauls of grain, heavy timber, and giant stone blocks using absolutely nothing but human muscle and friction. Now, hauling heavy rock slabs or loaded sledges across dirt and sand, that creates a massive amount of friction. It requires enormous, organized groups of people or beasts of burden pulling with all their might just to move a few inches. We're talking snapped ropes, crushed fingers, and extreme, bone-deep exhaustion. But then came a prehistoric solution that planted the very first seed for the wheel, rolling heavy objects over round tree logs, often called rollers. During the pre-Pottery Neolithic era, humans figured out that if you place a heavy stone on top of a series of logs, the logs roll forward, dramatically reducing that friction. But, it was incredibly tedious and required intense coordination. As the heavy stone inched forward, the logs left behind at the back had to be scooped up and frantically carried to the front of the stone just to keep the whole process moving. So it was a step forward for sure, but still wildly inefficient.
Section 2. The first reels.
Now we hit a truly surprising historical twist. You'd probably assume that after using logs to move heavy stones, some ancient genius immediately just sliced a log into thin discs, slapped them on a cart, and rode off into the sunset. But no, that is not what happened at all. The crucial, totally mind-blowing twist of history is that the very first wheels weren't invented for transportation. They were invented for manufacturing, specifically the potter's wheel. This was a revolving horizontal disc created around 4500 to 3500 BCE. Ancient peoples in Mesopotamia and the Cucuteni Tripilia culture in modern-day Ukraine figured out that if you drop a lump of wet clay on a rotating disc, you can quickly and evenly shape it into uniform pottery. And think about why this was an absolute game-changer for early human survival. Being able to mass-produce reliable, watertight storage vessels meant a society could safely store surplus grain from the harvest, keep their food safe from pests, and actually survive brutal, unforgiving winters. This single innovation allowed populations to absolutely boom. But here's the kicker. These civilizations were spinning these horizontal wheels to make clay pots for hundreds of years before anyone thought to turn them upright and use them to move a vehicle. And mapping this out chronologically brilliantly illustrates just how drawn out this process was. The gaps in time are enormous. First, we have the pre-Pottery Neolithic period, with those tedious log rollers. Then, fast forward thousands of years to 4500 BCE, and we finally get the potter's wheel. But it isn't until around 3500 BCE that we see the first transport wheels appearing in ancient Mesopotamia. And right on the heels of that, around 3200 BCE, we get the incredibly famous Ljubljana Marshes wheel. Discovered in Slovenia, this is a breathtaking piece of archaeology. It is literally the oldest actual physical wooden transport wheel ever excavated. It miraculously survived for over 5,000 years because it was perfectly preserved in the oxygen-poor, waterlogged bogs of the region. It gives us this tangible, direct physical link to the ancient mechanics who actually built it. Finally, skipping ahead to 2000 BCE, we see the invention of spoked wheels. So this timeline proves the wheel was definitely not an obvious overnight light bulb moment. It required millennia of steady incremental technological breakthroughs, just waiting for the right moment and the right societal needs to push it forward.
Section 3. The Transport Revolution.
To actually turn a horizontal potter's wheel into a vertical transport wheel, early engineers had to solve a tremendously difficult physics problem. It wasn't just about the wheel itself, right? It was about how the wheel attached to the vehicle. Enter the wheel and axle, recognized today as one of the 6 classical simple machines. A simple wooden circle is virtually useless on its own. It needs an axle, a central shaft to rotate around. This marriage of components was a monumental leap in physics and engineering. The true absolute genius of the wheel and axle is that it takes all that massive friction occurring between a heavy object and the ground, and it brilliantly shifts it to a tiny, smooth central hole where the axle rests. By creating a plain bearing, which is just a round hole through which a smooth, greased axle passes, early builders essentially hacked the laws of physics. They concentrated all the resistance into one manageable, miniature space, rather than dragging a massive, heavy footprint across rough terrain.
The sheer mathematical impact of that engineering hack is staggering, 1 to 40. Let me break this down because it perfectly highlights just how genius this invention is. If you have a heavy object weighing, say, 100 kilograms, and you drag it 10 meters across the dirt, the friction is immense. It requires around 4,900 joules of energy just to drag it. But if you pick up that exact same 100-kilogram object, place it onto a cart with wooden wheels and axles, and roll it that same 10 meters, it requires only about 123 joules of energy. That means rolling it takes roughly 1/40th of the work required to drag it. 1/40th. Suddenly, a single person could pull a load that previously required a whole exhausted team of people.
Once this incredible energy trick was unlocked, human capability just exploded. Early wagons, which were beautifully depicted in Sumerian pictographs at Uruk around 3500 BCE, completely reshaped society. Uruk is often considered the world's first true city, and it thrived specifically because wheeled carts allowed farmers to haul massive crop yields from distant fields right into city storehouses. That provided enough food to sustain tens of thousands of urban residents. Trade networks rapidly expanded because merchants could now transport heavy goods over vast, unforgiving deserts, connecting distant cities and sharing resources and ideas. Empires grew larger because communication and resource distribution became exponentially faster. And of course, it revolutionized warfare. The introduction of mobile supply trains meant armies could march further, carrying all their food and weaponry with them, which changed the scale of human conflict forever. The wheel was the literal engine of early empire building.
Structurally, this invention rapidly evolved. We start with solid wooden discs. They were heavy, clunky, and often made by joining multiple planks of wood together, because a single horizontal slice of a tree trunk is structurally weak and super prone to splitting along the grain. Then, around 2000 BC, the Santashta culture out in the vast Eurasian steppes had an incredible breakthrough: lighter spoked wheels. By carving out the heavy solid wood and leaving only tensioned spokes, wheels became incredibly lightweight. This single, brilliant innovation allowed for the terrifying speed and maneuverability of horse-drawn chariots, which completely dominated Bronze Age battlefields. Later on, fierce Celtic charioteers introduced iron rims to protect the wood from shattering on rocks, which greatly extended the life of the wheel. And finally, jumping all the way to the 1870s, we see the invention of pneumatic, air-filled tires, giving us the smooth, low-resistance ride that eventually paved the way for the modern automobile.
Section 4. Why reject the wheel? Okay, so we've talked about how brilliant and transformative the wheel is. You'd logically assume that every single advanced civilization on Earth would adopt it immediately upon discovery, right? But history has a fascinating geographic mystery for us. It all comes down to a concept called geographic determinism, and specifically one major factor: draft animals. In Eurasia, early civilizations had access to large, powerful, domesticatable draft animals, specifically oxen and horses. These animals could be easily harnessed to pull heavy wagons and chariots, making the wheel incredibly useful and totally worth the massive engineering effort. But look at the Americas before European contact. They didn't have horses. Early horse species there had gone extinct thousands of years prior. They had bison, which were wild, famously aggressive, and basically impossible to domesticate for farm work. The only large domesticated pack animal was the llama down in the Andes, but llamas are physically unsuited to pulling heavy wheeled carts. So because they lacked the biological engines to pull the carts, the transport wheel just simply wasn't a practical investment of their time and resources. But here is what is truly spectacular. The indigenous peoples of the Americas didn't lack the engineering genius to invent the wheel. They actually did invent it. Mesoamericans independently invented the wheel around 1500 BCE. They understood the physics of the axle and the rolling cylinder perfectly. Just picture bustling, massive Mesoamerican cities like Teotihuacan or early Maya settlements, where towering pyramids and incredible architectural feats were achieved entirely without wheeled transport. The wild irony is, because of those severe environmental factors, thick, unyielding jungles, incredibly steep mountainous terrain, and that complete lack of draft animals we just discussed, this brilliant understanding of rotational physics was used exclusively for small, ceramic, wheeled pull toys for children. It is absolutely amazing to realize that geographic isolation and environmental needs kept one of humanity's greatest machines at the scale of a child's plaything for thousands of years. It really proves that invention alone isn't enough. Technology only flourishes when the environment actually demands it.
Section 5. The Modern Legacy. So let's bring the story out of the dirt of antiquity and right into the present day to see how this simple concept of a rotating circle on an axle continues to drive human progress. Because the principle didn't just stay on carts. Once humanity deeply understood rotational mechanics, they applied it to absolutely everything. We added teeth to the edges of wheels to create cogwheels and gears. This gave us things like the ancient Greek Antikythera mechanism, which is essentially the world's first analog computer, and eventually paved the way for complex mechanical clocks that could accurately track time. We attached paddles to wheels to create water wheels, harnessing the kinetic energy of rivers to mill grain entirely without human labor. Today, if you look inside a modern jet engine, you are essentially looking at a highly advanced descendant of the wheel. A jet turbine relies on the exact same rotational physics developed by those ancient potters, rapidly spinning a series of bladed wheels on a central axle to compress air and generate thrust. From the propellers that cross our oceans to the gyroscopes that stabilize our satellites and our factory robotics, modern civilization is entirely dependent on spinning circle.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with the thought you're seeing now. The wheel wasn't just a circle of wood. It was humanity's first great machine, an invention that carried civilizations forward and continues to move the world even today. It's an epic story of incredible persistence. It began as an ingenious trick to mold wet clay, evolved over millennia into a revolutionary tool that made human labor 40 times easier, and ultimately became the unquestioned foundation for global industry, trade, and even space exploration. It is a brilliant testament to human curiosity and our relentless drive for adaptation.
And that brings us to a provocative question for you to ponder. What modern technology do we completely take for granted today that will be viewed as our generation's wheel thousands of years from now? What is the seemingly simple tool we're using right now that's going to lay the foundation for unimaginable future empires? Think deeply about that one. I really hope this explainer has sparked your curiosity and given you a whole new appreciation for the simple, brilliant mechanics rolling all around you every single day. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.